Good evening. I'll give you a moment to connect to your sound and get settled. Thank you for joining us. We're excited to have you here. We'll get started in just a minute. Now's the time where we're stalling and I kind of fill the air so people don't enter a silent room, but we'll get started in just a minute. Give another minute to let people join. And then we'll make some introductions. Thank you for joining us. Chag Sameach, for those who are celebrating. By the way, folks, turn on your cameras. We love seeing your living rooms. Please don't be shy. Be a part of this. We've been locked up for so long. Good. Make sure you're fully dressed. Okay, I think we could get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Isaac Zablocki. I am Director of Film Programs at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. Thank you so much for joining us on this special event with Etgar, Keret, and Inbal Pinto for the short film and story Outside. We want to give huge thanks to the Department of Cultural Affairs at the Consulate for sponsoring this event and making this possible. And it gives a big shout out to Daniel Zuz from the department, who works beautifully on bringing Israeli culture through film to the United States. And we are honored to have here Buni Kochavi, who is the Consul for Cultural Affairs in North America, to say a few words. Buni, Chag Sameach.
Thank you very much. You hear me, right? Yeah? Okay, so hello everyone. On behalf of the Consulate General of Israel in New York, I'm happy to take part in this event and would like to thank the JCC team for a long and successful partnership with us. I also want to thank Daniel Zuz, our Director of Film and Media, for his creativity and hard work that made this event happen. Tonight we will light, already doing that, 6 candles in the menorah of Hanukkah to celebrate and symbolize the winning of light on darkness and the strong will of our people to freedom and independence. I believe that in more than one way, it also symbolized our current fight against the COVID-19 pandemic and the struggle to bring light to our daily life by going back to normalcy. Because this pandemic affects each and every one of us, it can be subdued only by a united efforts, creativity, and collaboration across the world. And I find the work of Etgar, Keret, and Inbal Pinto Outside as an example for that. It was born from a collaboration between Etgar, Inbal, and the culture attaché at the Israeli Embassy in Tokyo, and became an Israeli-Japanese co-production that crossed borders of culture, nationality, language, time, and space. All these important things that suddenly are dwarfed by the importance of the fight against COVID-19 and the release from our existence inside the walls of Zoom, the internet, our computers, televisions, and home. This work of art is a good example why art is so important to us and why we have to find creative ways to support artists everywhere, and especially at these challenging times, and make sure they will keep telling us our unique stories. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Buni. And I think that's a perfect introduction. I don't need to say more to introduce this piece in our event for tonight. I'll just let you know that if you have questions, you could put your questions in the chat, and we'll give a little time for Q&A at the end, and we'll open up the chat for you to ask your questions live. We'll open up your microphone. So you could start by adding them to the chats as we move along. But now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Etgar, Keret, and Inbal Pinto. Etgar, Keret, of course, an internationally renowned author, and Inbal Pinto, an internationally renowned choreographer. And they came together to create this this COVID-19 piece called Outside, and started, as mentioned, as a short story. So Edgar and Inbal, thank you for being here with us.
Oh, thank you, Isaac.
Thank you.
So let me start by you telling me where did this all start? I guess it starts with you, Edgar. Where did it start?
Well, it started with a story that I wrote one day after the first lockdown was lifted, and I think that for a very long time I fantasized about going out, and I live next to Dizengoff Street, a very main street, and I kind of just imagined walking down the street and meeting people and waving hello to them and buying groceries and ice cream and I don't know what. And the moment that I went to the streets, it became busy that first day after the lockdown. I had a very jarring experience because somehow in my fantasy, in my imagination, people were nicer and they smelled better and were less pushy and more attentive. And after kind of like 10 minutes outside, I felt it was too much. You know, after this very long time of lockdown, I had this thing, this was a mistake. I should have stayed in my living room. Everything makes more sense there. And when I got back, I wrote this story about a world in which, when the lockdown is being lifted, the civilians or the citizens just refuse to leave their homes, and the government has to involve the police and an army knocking on people's door and pulling them out. And it's a story of this woman that is being pulled out to the street, and now that she's in the street, she has to kind of reconstruct her identity, try to figure out what was she working in, what did she want, where should she be heading. And this story was in the New York Times, the Cameron project, and I've shared it with quite a few people in Israel. And I think one of them was Ari Rosen, who had showed it to Inbal, thinking about some kind of a collaborative Israel-Japanese project that could take place. Inbal is very well known in Japan. She had made many wonderful projects there, including a musical based on Murakami's Wind Up Bird. And my work is also published in Japan, so the idea of us kind of being the Israeli representative of this work seemed to make sense. And Inbal and me were just eager to do something because Inbal was supposed to do a project for the Israeli opera that was put on hold. And with me, there was something that I could still write my stories, but I really longed for some kind of a collaborative work of art. And the fact that it was during COVID times, that nobody really wanted to broadcast our work, that we didn't have a proper production, that we had to call for favors and bring our own furniture, and get it into the frame, actually kind of made it a more important or crucial, because it kind of felt as if the pre-pandemic times in which being an artist, you could kind of take a very passive stance, wait for somebody to ask you for a submission, just do stuff when you have the budget. This was something that was kind of pulled off, under from under our feet like a carpet. And when we were there in midair, we had to decide what we were all about. And the idea is that I think in the bottom line, both for Inbal and for me, this work felt like a shout that we need to let out. So it kind of sent us very far away from our comfort zone, doing stuff that we not usually do, and basically just seeking the new and the right way to talk about the situation around us. And I think that it's because it was a meeting point between the text that I wrote, that was a very psychological, I would say almost hyper realistic story, and Imbal's a stage word that is always magical and fable like, that had made us kind of choose the form of a, I would say a pandemic fairy tale. We called it like Alice in COVID land, basically kind of taking a characters that would seem like some kind of an Alice or the Mad Hatter, or those kind of fable characters that we could meet in a green tale in the middle of the forest, and let them tell us this kind of urban mundane story in a different setting that would be more fantastical and magical.
I think you've accomplished that as far as getting that kind of feeling of it being very magical and fantastical. And Inbal, I'd love to hear from you, from your perspective. How did you come into this? Have you worked with a lot of dance on film before? And how is this different?
Well, I haven't done any film at all. So for me, it was the first time I've done film. When I got the phone call from Ari Rosen, actually, I didn't know what we are going to do, because naturally, dance we cannot do, we cannot perform. There's no stage, there's no theater opens. So the ground fell under our dancing feet, and we could not do anything about that. So it was literally, for me, very clear that something will transform this. And so when Ari offered me this collaboration with Etgar, I didn't know it's going to become film. We just start conversation, and very quick we understood this will be the platform, the most reasonable platform in this situation. And then we just start. When I read the story, I had usually when I'm reading stories, I'm very connected to the psychological aspect, and it's immediately influenced gives me like body ideas, like movement ideas. And one of the ideas when I had in mind when I read the story was someone that is trapped in the door between the outside and the in. And it was, and the other one was just like lost power body, something that has no, someone that has no, how do you say, matara?
Purpose.
Yeah. So, and we stopped working with the Moran that was inside my house. We start actually taking film and trying to play with different angles. For me, everything was new. So like zooming in, zooming out, what we're doing in theater, like lifting just the leg, it's not possible, just like you can focus on one leg, but actually you have you have the whole stage, and all of a sudden you can actually zoom in. For me, it was like very exciting thing. And so, I think because I'm working very visually, it was very naturally for me to have like many pictures that like creating a lot of, images that are connecting to what we called film. So, yeah, that was the, and so Etgar and I start conversation. We had many synopsises. We start writing together many ideas, playing at the same time, working in my kitchen table and trying to improvise with Moran, and slowly we summarized our idea into what became the film. We started also preparing the Japanese collaborating with Mirai, who's acting. Rehearsing through Zoom, and he brought all the cast of like the costume maker and the photographer, and he did, which is like group that he's doing with a couple of projects, and they built everything, and together with Ari Rosen, who was a big supporter for the film, we made it happen. I mean, for me, it was like, this is how it should be, probably.
And Ari Rosen, if I'm not mistaken, is the cultural attaché in Japan. He's
right.
the Buni of Japan. Buni, we're setting a standard here for you. You need to produce the next big project.
Well, what I want to say is that what I think for me was very special about this project is that it sent almost everybody who worked on it away from their comfort zone, because Ari Rosen, who's a cultural attaché at the Israeli embassy in Tokyo, suddenly found himself that he's a Japanese producer, catering hummus and falafel to the crew, finding parking solution, you know, dealing with the problem with lighting. And, you know, and Inbal, who really never did any film project before, quickly, you know, started editing scenes on apps, you know, learning about shooting angles and doing many things that she hadn't done before. And with me, I had to really start to understand something about the language of dancing, because I usually in art usually my character express themselves verbally, and you know, and everything about this project, you know, it's like from sponsors like, you know, Factory 54 or Mishkenot Sha'ananim, which is a cultural house in Israel. None of this worked in the normal mode of how you make a project. It was basically kind of us knocking on doors, asking people for help, and people kept helping us. You know, we're doing this meeting in New York, so you know, so we talked with Zazim, a body that actually supports Israeli art in New York, and they helped us screen the movie in Times Square. You know, we talked with Habima, Israeli National Theater, and they let us screen it on the wall of Habima or in Shibuya Crossing in Japan. And all our partners basically were asked to do something they didn't do before. And there was this kind of joy that we felt we are like some kind of a cultural partisan or a cultural underground, each kind of bringing their know-how to make our kind of a improvised cultural bomb, and trying to speak about things as they happen and not through kind of the normal channel. And there was something very liberating about such an experience.
And let me ask you, on set itself, being in COVID times, did you feel restricted? Did you feel that you were able to keep your 6 feet apart or whatever it took?
Yes. No,
from the beginning, we had a larger synopsis with 20 dancers and whatever, and outside screening, shooting, and we all at the end we understand that we doing a piece on the pandemic, and we're gonna film it with the limitation of the pandemic. So I mean, one of the things is to actually minimalize all of our ideas to one person in Israel filming and one person in Japan shooting, and then that was one of the things that.
Yeah, I think our best trick, you know, to keep our two leads safe was to shoot them in different continents, you know, so it was much more than 6 feet away. So it's a love story between a guy who's in Japan and a girl who's being shot in Tel Aviv, and we had no fear whatsoever because in both sets we were shooting one person. So as long as, you know, as the crew didn't start French kissing each other, we knew that we'll survive it.
So I'd like to start taking this film apart, because I have a lot of questions about the film itself. So I thought this was kind of a little bit of an experiment to watch a little bit together. It's because it's only 10 minutes long. To watch a little bit together, to talk about the different scenes, to talk about your creative process with each different moment, and see what we can learn about the different languages that actually come together here, which I think is one of the nice things that you're kind of saying here, is that there's this merging between literary, film, and dance that comes together that I think can bring people who are used to different languages to suddenly possibly speak new languages. So let me share my screen here. Let me do this right. I'm doing this wrong already. But we'll watch different moments from it, and we could talk also as it goes on. I'm assuming everybody has seen it. By the way, I recommend also people reading this short. It's very, very short, and we have the links to both on our pages. But we'll take a look at the beginning of it just to discuss a little bit of the opening. And I know it's not going to be perfect, folks, because sharing on Zoom is not the way to watch a movie. Let me pause for a second here. I have some questions. So first of all, I think you set it up great with this very whimsical tone that comes from both the music and, of course, that floating. And how many of us have not also slept on our kitchen tables or dining room tables throughout the pandemic? Tell me about that dining room table that plays such a big part in this whole film. Whose dining room table is that?
It's Inbal's, and it's basically we did all the rehearsal on it, and I think our basic idea was that we wanted to show somebody that had lost her sensation of time and her sensation of I don't know of civil conduct, you know, of how you act with other people. And the first image that we had in our mind was this kind of top shot of these girls that fell asleep on the table. You know, I don't know. The truth is that when I was a bachelor, I had this thing that in my apartment sometimes I would fall asleep on a mattress on the balcony. Sometimes I would fall asleep in the living room. Sometimes I would fall asleep in my room. And I remember this period very well. And it was this kind of indefinable period that it wasn't even I wasn't even able to know what day of the week it was. I wasn't even able to know what month it was. And I think that this idea of somebody who kind of wakes up in a place that is not supposed to wake up, and kind of it kind of brings up this mystery of trying to reconstruct of the question of how does a person get there, or what does it have to happen in your mind that you will find yourself in such a situation.
And Inbal, do you want to talk about a little bit the dance movements there and that kind of floating effect that you use?
First of all, the music was written by Umitaro Abe, is a musician that I'm working, Japanese musician that I'm working with him for a couple of years. And me and we both worked with Morand on this music from the beginning. I had a few of his CDs and we start playing with this. As I said at the beginning, the body is like left without power, without purpose, and almost like nightmarish kind of pulses that this is like the physicality that we were searching for, and also just playing with the musicality of the plates and the cups that are just thrown there. So it's between sleep and awake, and yeah, that was like at the beginning we actually tried to put a lot of plate, and that the music will come out from the cracking plates, breaking plates. This was the idea at the beginning, how to connect the music and the physicality. Mm-hmm. And I think there is a little bit of that left, where you can hear here and there popping, breaking glass and moving elements that becomes part of the musicality of our dance.
And there's also this kind of like a dollhouse effect, this idea that basically I think that both the way that Moran is being dressed and her hair is being done and the space that she's in, it feels kind of a meeting point between a living room and something that you would imagine in your dollhouse, in a dollhouse if you cut off one of its walls. This idea that I always had this feeling that the perspective of dollhouses, because we keep moving stuff inside, they're basically kind of too big. So they always feel very vacant. You know, when you see a doll sitting next to a table in a dollhouse, you always say, "Oh, I wish my doll would have more friends." You know, you kind of push your teddy bear inside just so it won't feel so lonely. So I think that we were aiming a little bit to this kind of a dollhouse feeling.
It also looks a little bit.
Sorry.
It looks a little bit like her body is being moved by other person a little bit in that moment of beginning, like she's being controlled by something else.
Totally. I think that also, I mean, it's also shot beautifully, and the art decisions, like, that old TV as a decision of where to put it, like, puts it into such a, like, kind of out of time kind of space for it.
Well, I must say that that we had really the best crew that one could ask for, because it was COVID time and people were not working, and because the people that we went to were not only the best, but we were also the people that we felt that will be curious about it. So, for example, our cinematographer Ziv Berkovich is a very, very popular and successful cinematographer, shooting both in Israel and the US. And our Art Shmulik is really doing the biggest project ever in Israel, and both of them found themselves working on a shoestring budget, with us kind of coloring the furniture of my late mother, or doing stuff like that. And I felt that it brought from all of us this kind of innovativeness, because I think we're each of us, all from of the people who worked there, had been around for maybe at least 20 years, working and doing things and challenging ourselves. But there was something about this project that kind of brought us back to basic. Even though some of us are 50 plus, it really felt like doing our first year student film, in a film school, and that was amazing.
I think if one thing comes out of this this COVID is that, yes, a lot of people are going back to the basics, and maybe there's we're realizing that we're spending way too much money in these huge Hollywood productions when you could really go back to making things in a little bit of a more guerrilla style. I want to ask a question here. We're seeing the playing the piano on the table, and I wanted to know about that a little bit. I took it as I feel like, again, our dining room tables have become multi-purpose in our lives, and have become where we work and where we kind of do everything. And I wanted to know where you guys were coming on that.
Well, for me, it really connected me to. There is a very short short story that I really like by Stefan Zweig called in Hebrew it's called The Game of the Kings, but it's about chess. And the story is about a chess player in the time of a Jewish chess player in the time of the Second World War. He was a guy who just knew chess, but was had to stay in hiding for a few years. And in this period, because he had nothing else to do, he would play chess games against himself in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened is that after the war was over, he kind of challenges the champion of the world and seems to be beating him, until at some stage he plays not by the rules, because when he used to play with himself in his mind, sometimes he would move the knight in a wrong way, but there wouldn't be anybody there who'd say to him, you're not allowed to do that, because he was both like both players and referee and audience. And there was something in this moment that was very, very powerful, and felt to me very much like this COVID moment of isolation. So for me, when I see her playing on that piano, and by the way, Moran really does play on the piano, and it's a piece that she knows how to play, so she's actually playing it, then there was something about this kind of idea of how isolation can create a new reality in your mind. Because when you're alone and you're pretending that you're playing the piano, you can actually feel you're playing the piano, and there will be nobody to conquer that. There will be nobody to say, what are you doing? Why are you throwing this stuff on this? Or why are you doing stuff as if you're playing something? Because there is no reference. And I think that, for the moment in which Mirai, through the TV, kind of invades her privacy, engages in a dialogue in her, it's basically, I think, we looked for a very private moment to be interrupted. It's like, I don't know, I have this shower moment where I look at my tummy and I ask myself if I'm fat or how fat I am and how do I look in different postures. So for me, this would be a moment where if a Japanese anchor guy would say, Edgar, get a hold on yourself, there will be an effect of kind of a switch, like of turning on a coin, and there was something in the excess kind of playing the piano without playing the piano, basically doing something that is totally ridiculous, but you're immersed by it, that seemed to us like a good segue to the dialogue between her and Mirai.
Inbal, do you want to add to that or talk about these movements on the couch, which also I think is a very familiar scene?
I mean, yeah, I mean, we were trying to play with all kinds of ideas. What do you do when we have a lot of time at home? And I mean, how is to play a piano without a piano? It's like how to dance without a partner who lifts you, or how to dance with without a studio, without. So I mean, and the flower is actually that is on the table is something that actually we do quite a lot when we are home. I mean, I'm like cooking like I've never cooked before. Yeah, that's the thing, that there was a lot of dance sequence that we actually build, which we haven't put in the film, right? And I think it's an endless thing, you know, like waking up without a purpose and just like playing on the table without a piano. This is something that, yeah, it's like the dancers who has no place to dance, you know, for me.
And the next ironic moment that I find is, you know, the man inside the box is telling everybody to go outside.
I think one of the challenging thing is to understand the architecture of the place, and where Mirai is actually looking according to Moran's, which is like we actually had one day in the set in Israel and one day in the set in Japan, and understanding what is the relationship, while Mirai was actually being shot first and then Moran was after. So we had to imagine where Moran will be located according to his actions.
Mm-hmm.
But also, you know, as you were saying, the idea is that when we boxed in, most of the time we're watching another box and we see other people who are boxed in. And I think that, you know, experiencing the world through a TV set really gives you this feeling of limitation. You know, I keep meeting anchormen who could still be wearing their pajamas the same way that I'm wearing my pajamas right now, the honest disclosure. You know, the fact that we are being kind of put in a frame, that we have some kind of a partial window to reality, because it is not only in a box, it's the only window that she has in her home, and it looks right into another wall in the same color that she has in her own living room. So I really feel that this kind of dialogue of inside and outside that we have in times of isolation, or generally in which we don't communicate with the outside, we don't communicate with the wilderness, we just communicate with other kind of rectangular shapes that keep something kvetched inside.
It's very interesting that throughout this pandemic, we're forced, our time outside is through Netflix. It's through an event like this. It's through, we just had our other Israel Film Festival, and we saw how hungry people were to interact and connect, and we're doing it through a box that's also, as you say, inside, and we're isolated within that. This moment reminded me of the scene in Star Wars. Remember the scene in Star Wars, the first one?
Yeah.
The walls were closing in.
Yeah, it's a little bit less budget was involved, and you know, and from the two sides from one side it was my wife Shira who was pushing the wall, and from the other side it was Moran's fiancé who was pushing the wall, and of course there were other people who were doing that, but it was no Star Wars. I tell you that.
Yeah, for sure.
Here you get to the scene of the ending of the story, where when I read the story itself, I found a very profound moment, actually, because what I liked about the story is, like, there's a good setup here. It's a nice setup that, it's a world where you have to force people to go outside after being inside so long. And that kind of like turns everything on its head. And then there's this moment, and maybe this is something that's also different here in the story than different in the film than the story. There's the moment where your character goes outside and then goes to buy cigarettes, which is like the worst. She can't breathe, but she wants a cigarette because that's like the worst thing you could do when you can't breathe. And it's such not a necessity for, I'd say, most people, but has this moment of kind of odd interaction. It allows for an odd interaction, but then it really sets up this ending very nicely, because the person who's stuck outside, also, I think another moment that might not exist in the film is that it was a she, right? She can't go back into the house. She can't go back, and they won't let her into her house to get money, to get her wallet, which is just such an ironic moment that usually it's the opposite, of course. And she can't go in for that. So all she has is this 5 shekel coin, and she wants to buy a cigarette with her 5 shekels, and she can't buy cigarettes with her 5 shekels. But when she sees a homeless man on the street who's asking her for money for food, who hasn't eaten in 2 days, then, as the caption says here, you do remember what you're supposed to do in this situation. And we get to this to the last line of the story. I think it's taken. You quickly walk past him, and when he tells you, it's going slow, sorry.
Correct voice that he hadn't eaten anything in 2 days. You look in the opposite direction, avoiding eye contact, like a pro. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's like riding a bike. The body remembers everything. And the heart that softened when you were alone will harden back up in no time.
So I feel like that is what got me in the story, was this, like, going back to normal. You two will very quickly learn how to make movies for a big budget again. You'll forget about your independent spirit.
The thing is that throughout the pandemic, I kept hearing what I felt was this kind of victim narrative of saying, oh, life was great, we were so nice to each other, we hugged each other and loved each other and danced in the street, and then this damn virus came and ruined everything, and we're going to be nasty and alienated now, but it's not our fault, it's the virus' fault. And for me, basically, I feel that the pandemic, like almost everything, it's no more than the background of a story. It's like having a set on stage. The same set could serve a comedy or a tragedy, or a political play or a musical. And there is a content that we put inside, but the idea of saying, the pandemic did it to us, then, to be honest, for me, what I felt that there was something about the lockdown and the isolation that in many senses made us more human. We used our imagination more. We saw more the people who were close to us. We became more empathic, less hectic, losing less the force of inertia and actually listening more to ourselves. And there is something beautiful but also scary about that, because if you think about it, let's say on an evolutionary scale, if you put a rabbit, then all the time it will be in the lookout of predators, or if you put a predator, it will all the time be in a lookout for prey, so that's why lions and rabbits don't write that many poems, because they're busy, but if you put if you put a rabbit in a place where it had nothing to be scared of, then maybe the rabbit will discover something about itself. But the moment that things will go back to normal and wolves will be running around, then probably the rabbit will forget that. I'm saying it very in a choked voice because I have a rabbit, and and I hope that he will not forget all those beautiful things that he had learned in our wolf-free living room, if he'll ever get out.
So this wasn't a simile. This was actually a reality.
What was funny that when we published the film in Japan, at the same day, the Japanese government put an ad in the newspaper for a project, which the name of the project is Go Out. The Japanese government never put anyone in quarantine. They were always, there was a free will to stay at home or to live out. And slowly, more and more people stayed in their homes. And so there was a moment that the government realized that without asking the lockdown, actually people are locking themselves at home and no one is going out. So at the same day when the film came out, this ad came out and asking the people. So I feel like many times, these stories, it's like a prophecy, like you can maybe Etgar actually predict what will happen, in some places. And I think that's the beautiful, the power of it.
Yeah, it's funny because my latest story collection is called Flower Ready, and it came out I think more than a year ago, a year and 3 months ago in the U.S. And right now it's being published in other parts of the world, like in Poland and other places, and in Bulgaria. And I get questions from journalists: how will you be able to write a story collection about the pandemic so fast? Because the book was written before the pandemic, but I think that there is something about the virus. That virus always attacks the weakest part in our body or in our social structure. So the virus didn't create a reality. More than anything, it exposed the reality. And I think that the reality that we've experienced was a reality of some kind of isolation, anxiety, uncertainty about the future. This kind of feeling of a world that keeps changing and that we don't know what exactly the rules are. And I think that these sensations preceded the pandemic. And also, and I really feel that it's not so much as a prophecy, but let's say when we talk about this idea of people who do not want to leave their home from isolation, the thing about it is that it's something that is intuitively understood by any person. Each of us that was in a lockdown can really think about some experiences that he has out queuing in a supermarket, fighting with somebody over a parking place, and say, you know what, I actually like my balcony. It's good enough for me here. But at the same time, it has nothing to do with the kind of the collective narrative that we keep hearing. Nobody speaks about it. And the same goes for the fact that, that for me, for the past 5 years, I feel that the world is changing, that I understand it less and less, that I don't understand the rules of the political world, that I don't understand the rules of other things around me. But this doesn't echo from anywhere. It's just like, I was talking with Inbal, we were in another panel, and I was talking about the fact that for example, everybody keeps talking about the idea that after the pandemic will be over, we will lose physical contact with each other, because we used to hug each other and shake hands, and we don't do that anymore. But I can tell you, while living through the pandemic, that actually when I meet my best friend and I meet my brother, I still hug them. I don't want to. I'm very reluctant. I say we have to be careful. I say to my brother, you're chubby. I have asthma. It's background. Who knows? I don't want you. But in the end, I find myself kissing him and hugging him. So maybe another story we can say is that maybe the pandemic had put a price tag on physical gestures, meaning that we don't give them for free. We don't give any more fake hugs. We just give hugs to those we can't survive without hugging, that we think that it's worth the risk hugging them. So I think that many times it's not about telling things about what's going to happen. It's telling people think about what's happening right now, and that for some reason they fail to notice because they're following another narrative.
Let's see where we land and hope that we can be, that we can take the best from this and be a little more real after the pandemic and and see also how it changes us. I remember during 9/11 here in New York, I remember I was like, how can life ever be the same? Everything's going to change. But you know what? It went back to normal. It all became the same, and maybe our airplane experiences changed, but day-to-day life kind of stayed the same and went back to a normal.
But I can tell you, as kind of a tourist, that, for example, I had this feeling that after September 11, that, you know, this idea of kind of New York is full of alienated assholes that if you die in the street will never help you. This myth got demystified, you know, with firemen taking showers in houses next to this place, and with people kind of pulling each other and helping each other. So there was something about it that I'm not saying, you know, I don't think that that New York is like the friendliest village on this globe, but I think that September 11 did kind of institutionalize this idea that this is a big, powerful, and basically humane place, you know. So I do think that, you know, that the transitions are not kind of binary. We don't necessarily are being thrown from one side to another, but very much so, like, I don't know, like when we move between apartment and we suddenly discover a, you know, a book that we thought we've lost, or we discover a lot of crap that we thought that we got rid of a long time ago, and when we move to the next apartment we will still have our stuff, but we will organize them differently and maybe have a little bit of a different hierarchy, and maybe put on a pedestal something that we thought we didn't have, or throw away a big furniture that we always thought was necessary for our lives. And I think that there is something about this kind of dynamics, that it's kind of underground. It's made of little but crucial movements, that is basically what's making our life now and what will make our future life. And it's our roles as artists to make people kind of listen more to that.
I want to give an opportunity for people from the audience to ask questions. If you have any, put them in the chat, and we'll open your mic to ask them. If you want to raise your hand as well, we can do it the old-fashioned way and take your question from your hand. But in the meantime, maybe you could each tell me what you're working on next. What's next for you artistically? Inbal,
hopefully I'm going to finish the opera I was supposed to do when the pandemic began, and so this year I'm going to do work on another stage work that hopefully will premiere in 22. I'm at the same time I'm working on my next project in Japan, which will be, I cannot say, and based on a very known story in Japan. And yeah, that's it basically.
And I'm pretty sure that Inbal is gonna make many more beautiful movies, because she's really a natural born filmmaker.
Wow, thank you, Edgar. I would like to collaborate with Edgar, so I'm searching for all kinds of ideas of how to make it happen.
Yeah, I think if you ever need a video dance about Jews dancing in New York, just give us a call.
You bring the crew in. You bring the whole crew. You start pushing walls together. Edgar, what's next for you? What are you working on?
Well, I'm writing stories. I'm working on a TV series that I hope, you know, if I get the budget to shoot in Israel. It's a supernatural thriller that I work on with Hamutal Gur. And I also I'm consulting Alma Ariel, a Israeli American filmmaker who's adapting a short story of mine, Island, to an Amazon Prime series. So I'm also kind of involved with that.
Very cool. And we're looking forward to hopefully someday screening your last TV series, the French TV series that you made. Say again?
The Middleman, L'Agent Immobilier.
The Middleman, that's what it was translated to. I think it was like The Agent for a moment. It was...
Yeah, no, but for us it was always The Middleman, because actually this is the literal translation from Hebrew. Metavech, real estate guy, Metavech is the middleman. And both Shira and me, we like the idea that the guy is that kind of the real estate agent he's always kind of in the middle between somebody who wants to live in an apartment and somebody who wants to rent it, you know. And the question is, how much space of your own can you have when you're the middleman? You know, where is your word? Do you only transform energies from one to another, or do you actually have some kind of a core that creates your life energies? And it's really we got to work with Mathieu Amalric, who's really an amazing actor, who's in every frame in this miniseries. So I really hope that there will be a chance to see it in the US, because for me personally, I think it's probably one of the best or the most interesting project I've ever worked on.
I've seen it and it is great. So I highly recommend keep your eyes open for that. We do have a question from Ruthie from the audience. Ruthie, you're on the air.
Hi, everybody. First of all, you have to excuse me that I'm walking. I'm in New York City and I went out to see the sunset and thought it was over and just turned around, and it turns out it's really amazing. I'll see if I can show it here, or just for a second, if I can turn my camera. I don't know if you can see the red, but it's very beautiful. So my question was for Inbal and Etgar, I thought it was really interesting what you were talking about, especially Inbal, about how you do a lot of dance and how storytelling on video around dance is very different than on a stage. And so I was wondering, and also I was thinking about, obviously this was initially a written short story and now it became a film and a dance piece. And I was curious if you could each talk a little bit about the differences for you around storytelling in a written story versus in dance versus in a film. I was curious to learn a little bit more about that.
So basically, when I'm doing a dance performance, I never start with a story. But when I meet a story, then I usually think of what is the physical essence of each of the characters, and so I usually divide the words and the movement, and I try to make to see what can I say, which word can be transformed to dance, and which words can stay as words. And usually I play with this kind of thought. So when I did a musical in Japan based on Murakami, which is 700 pages, it was a big job to minimalize it to dance, to musical, to singing, to and to spoken words. Yeah, so it's really depend, but I mean, many things can be transformed to dance. You can say a lot by physical actions. I think also if you mute some of the words, you can actually relate to the physical aspect of these characters. And if you read just this, the story of Etgar, you can just try to imagine what kind of physicality can come out from this psychological aspect of it. Yeah, and also I play with drawings. I usually, when I do plan ahead, then I have my sketchbook, which I always paint the characters, and that gives me reflections of the character that I want to have on stage, and what kind of physicality, and what she would dress, and what she would have. Yeah, and so it's always it's like a dialogue between the painting sometimes and the dance in the studio.
I can say that for me, usually the incentive to collaborate has nothing to do with the medium. It's just with the who is the person I'm going to work with. So I've did quite a few collaboration with graphic with illustrator and graphic designers, and basically just people that I saw the work and I said, wow, I want to do something with them. I want to have a chance to have a peek in their mind, to learn, to try to find some kind of a meeting point between us. The same goes also to filmmaking. You know, for Shira and me, we really wanted to do a TV project with Mathieu Amalric, because we felt that there was something in his essence that could kind of take our literary word and kind of widen it. And I had the same feeling with Inbal. I've known Inbal's work for, I think, at least 20 years, maybe even more than that, and I've always admired it. And it, I was never in any kind of a pragmatic structure in which it would kind of, it seemed to make sense to make a writer and a choreographer work together. But suddenly when the opportunity came, then for me it was not this idea of I'm going to work on a dance, but just this idea that I'm going to finally get to work with Inbal.
We are almost out of time, and we promised that there would be candle lighting as well. We have a rabbi to lead us in the candlelight.
No,
I brought for both of us, Edgar.
Edgar, you said you were providing the sufganiyot. Did you not bring the sufganiyot?
The virtual ones, yeah. It's like cookies. You write accept sufganiyot and it will be downloaded to your desktop.
They're almost as good, those virtual ones. But actually, this is a great opportunity for me to tell you about two upcoming events. One, we are actually, in honor of Hanukkah, also showing the film The Donut King, which tells this amazing story of an immigrant from Cambodia who starts this donut empire on the West Coast. And we're going to have a conversation with the director on December 17th. That's Thursday night, in 2 nights. And tomorrow night we have Andrea Savage, who played the woman who became president at the end of Veep. She had her own show called I'm Sorry. She was also on the show Episodes, and she's going to be in conversation with Rachel Winter tomorrow night. So please join us for those and help spread the word. It's a very active week here for Hanukkah. And I will help us light candles. Does somebody want to lead?
Oh, ho, ho.
Anybody else got some fire?
I think you're not allowed to bless on the candles twice a night, and so no, really, because we really had our own lighting about 20 minutes ago.
I'm glad you've become so religious. It's good.
I'm only in it for the donuts.
Fair. Inbal, do you want to lead us? I see you.
No, Edgar.
Somebody.
No way. It's really, if you push me into a corner, I will try to say to you that this holiday talks a lot about how you can flip a narrative and make a tale about how fundamentally religious people who killed other people who wanted to have more advanced views became the hero of a holiday. So we don't want to get there. I think we'll stop here.
It's once again the story of Star Wars.
Yeah. It's kind of ISIS and donuts all together in a Jewish robe.
It works. It's timeless. I'll say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher k'dishanu tzitav v'tzivanu l'adlik ner shel Chanukah.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa nisim avotenu bayamim hahem b'zman hazeh.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. And thank you, Inbal. Thank you, Etgar. Thank you to the Israeli consulate.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Buni.
Thank you, Buni. Thank you, Daniel.
Bye.
Stay safe, everyone. Stay warm. Stay up. We have a snowstorm coming. You caught us just before.
Wow.
Stay warm.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.